Kant is famous for his claim that it is only doing things for duty's sake that is morally good. But what are his reasons for that claim? In this video, I'll briefly talk about some of Kant's arguments as he presents them in his books, The Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals and The Critique of Practical Reason. And although I will not present Kant's arguments precisely as he did, what I'll say will, I think, capture the essence of his arguments. So why is doing things for the sake of duty so important for Kant? One can say that Kant inquires into the ground of goodness. He wants to see what can be good in itself, and so the very ground and source of goodness in actions. Let's see how. When we call an action good, it can be good either as a means to an end that we take to be good, or the action can be good in itself. When an action is good as a means to an end that we take to be good, then the action is not good in itself, but rather derives its goodness from the end that it is going to bring about. And on the other hand, when an action is good in itself, then its goodness is internal to the action itself. The action has intrinsic value. Let's think about this with the help of an example. We might say, for instance, that getting a university education is good. Now we can ask, why is it good? Is it something that is good in itself and has to be pursued by absolutely everyone in any circumstances because it has intrinsic value and should never be ignored? Or is it something that is good only as a means to an end that we take to be good, and so that its goodness is conditioned? It is good only insofar as it can bring about that end that we expect to achieve. For instance, having better job opportunities. So that for people who want to have better job opportunities, it might be a good thing to get a university education. And then we can ask, why is having better job opportunities something good? Is it good in itself, or rather only good as a means to an end that we take to be good, such as having a higher income? And we can keep asking that question until we find an end that is not a means to a further end, but that is good in itself. And the only candidate here seems to be happiness. Happiness seems to be the ultimate end, above which there is no higher end. It is not a means to a further end beyond itself. So if that is so, happiness would be something that is good in itself, and so would be what determines what actions are good and what actions are not. Only those actions would be good that bring about happiness, that result in happiness, because happiness is the ultimate end and something that is good in itself. But Kant would disagree that happiness can be something good in itself, and he has two general reasons for that. One, happiness is a relative state, Kant thinks. Different people find happiness in different things. For instance, one person might find happiness in becoming an athlete, and another person might find satisfaction in becoming an artist or a scientist or an entrepreneur or in building a family or anything else. Different people find happiness and satisfaction in different things. So that if happiness were the ground of goodness, then the very concept of goodness itself would become relative. So that what one person does would be good insofar as it helps them in becoming happier, and what another person does would be good for them insofar as it helps them in becoming happier. So in that way, we would lose all criteria of evaluating actions, because goodness itself would become relative to what makes different people happy. But maybe we can give a general description of what happiness consists in for everyone. Maybe we can specify certain conditions under which most people would mostly feel happy. And Kant is ready to entertain that possibility, but even if that was possible, Kant would say, even then, happiness could not be the ground of goodness of actions. And here is his second argument for that. Happiness, Kant says, is a natural state, and no natural state can be good or bad, and so happiness cannot be the ground of goodness of actions. Let's examine that in more detail. Happiness is a natural state. It is what happens to a certain species of organisms, here human beings, under certain circumstances given their biological and psychological makeup. And no natural state can be good or bad. Imagine, for instance, a rock rolling down a hillside, or the rain falling, or the wind blowing. Are they good or bad? These are just natural events. And no natural event, no natural state can be good or bad. They're just what they are, natural events. There's no sense in calling them good or bad. So too with happiness. Happiness is a natural state which occurs in a certain species of organisms, and it has no intrinsic value. Now, if happiness cannot be the ground of goodness of actions, and something that is good in itself, what can? Remember when we started examining goodness, we had two options. Either an action is good because it serves as a means to an end that we take to be good, and so derives its goodness from that end, which would ultimately be happiness, or an action is good in itself, and so its goodness is not dependent on its consequences and on what it brings about and on whether it contributes to our happiness or not. Now, do we have any such actions that we take to be good in themselves regardless of their consequences? Kant thinks we do. Think, for instance, of a case in which someone is called on to give a report on something, and we expect that person to be honest and to tell the truth. Now, do we expect that person to be honest and tell the truth because we think its consequences would be desirable for that person? Do we expect that person to be honest and to tell the truth because we think that would bring them some benefits or prevent some harms to them? Or do we expect that person to be honest and to tell the truth because one has to be honest and to tell the truth regardless of its consequences? And Kant thinks we have a word to describe actions that we take to be good in themselves regardless of their consequences, and that's the word duty. When we say we have a duty to do something, what it means is that that action has intrinsic value and we have to do it regardless of whether it makes us any happier, regardless of whether it brings us any benefits, and regardless of its consequences. And today I think we're more inclined to use the word responsibility rather than duty, but I should add that for Kant, duty is not something that is determined by a religion or by a state. It is rather determined by a standard, so to speak, that any human being as a rational being can understand, just as any human being can recognize the value of truthfulness and of justice. There are more concepts one has to talk about in order to give a fuller picture of Kant's moral philosophy, but in this video I hope to have provided an introductory understanding of why the concept of duty plays an important role in Kant's moral thought.